idea is to take all of the disincentives to work together on a team away.
Hello and welcome to Clinical Changemakers, the podcast that explores vital lessons in healthcare leadership, innovation, and so much more. I'm your host, Dr. Jono. Today on the podcast, we have Dr. Stephen Swensen. He is a medical doctor with over 35 years of experience at the Mayo Clinic. He has served in a number of senior roles at the Mayo Clinic, including the Director of Leadership and Organisational Development. He's an award winner and author of 3 books, with his most recent called Mayo Clinic Strategies to Reduce Burnout. So let's begin. Dr. Stephen Swensen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Good to be here, Jono. Thank you.
So before we talk about your amazing experience at the Mayo Clinic Health System and all of the incredible programs and interventions that you guys did around healthcare and organisational development, I'd love to know a little bit more about your background and your journey into healthcare, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I grew up in a small town, Wisconsin, and 3 boys in 1 bedroom and 3 girls in another bedroom. So 8 folks in our family, and we all shared 1 bathroom, and all 6 kids stayed at home for college, which was, my dad was a professor, and my mother was a preacher after the 6 kids left home. I think that formed some of my social equity, human interaction kind of dimensions in the early years. My mother's brother, my uncle, was a Mayo Clinic physician also, and he was one of my role models growing up. And I always admired my Uncle Glenn and wanted to be like him. And he was a mentor and friend. He died young at 53, but he before he died, I was able to join the staff of Mayo, which was always my dream. And I spent my whole career there, 35 years. And I don't call myself retired. Because I transitioned from Mayo in the last 7 years. I've been working full time, but I just don't carry a pager and I don't take call anymore.
Wow, so quite a childhood and very fascinating story. It's great to hear a role model, particularly in the family, bringing you into healthcare. What were those early experiences like of healthcare at the Mayo Clinic for you?
Well, I trained at Mayo and then University of Wisconsin in Madison for medical school. I did my chest work out in Boston at Harvard. And I had 6 different careers at Mayo. And the first career I had that lasted 35 years was taking care of patients. And I did diagnostic and interventional chest work. Mayo's a physician-led organization. And I think that's an attribute of healthcare organizations that I think is very positive. I know there are other models that work. But if you wanted a world-class symphonic orchestra, you would want a conductor who used to play the violin or was a percussionist instead of someone who just studied how to conduct an orchestra. And so I think that's critical of building trust and really understanding what the mission of the organization is, healthcare organization, and what it really means to be close and to run a patient-centered organization. And at Mayo, all of the clinician, physician leaders practice medicine. So how can you have a bunch of doctors, less than 5% of them have an MBA or MHA, run a $17, $18 billion not-for-profit organization that sees patients from 152 to 155 countries every year and all 50 states every year? Well, that would be crazy to have doctors do that and still practice medicine, do it part-time. So the approach at Mayo is a dyadic and team leadership model. So all the clinicians, including the CEO, chairs of large departments, small departments, deans, their allocation for time is 20 to 80%. And the rest of the time, they're practicing medicine, and they partner with a full-time administrative team, including a full-time administrator who is trained with a fellowship level or the master's level than MBA or MHA or equivalent. And then in addition to that dyadic partner, full-time administrator, there's a whole administrative team of education experts, research experts, finance experts, accounting experts. So it's a team approach, but it's led by a practicing physician.
And obviously it wasn't always like that. So when did this type of model come about, and what was that journey like?
Mayo is about 167 years old now. Started in the 1860s by a English immigrant family, William Morrow Mayo. So it's the first and largest integrated group practice in the world. All the physicians on a pure salary system, so there's no production model, there's no bonuses. Every pediatrician makes exactly the same as every other pediatrician. Every cardiac surgeon makes exactly the same, no matter how many papers they publish, how much teaching they do, how many cases they do. So it's very egalitarian, and very all the benefits and all of the practices are transparent. And so from the early days of Mayo, Harry Harwick was the first administrator, and he was an administrative partner for the Mayos that were full-time surgeons. And so it's a model that we've been modifying and polishing and sculpting for a century and a half. It was the first integrated group practice. Many of the others in the world are modeled after it, like the Cleveland Clinic and the Oxford Clinic and Virginia Mason. The idea is to take all of the disincentives to work together on a team away. And it goes beyond that. So every department has to deliver collectively world-class medicine, research, education. We have like over 4,000 students or trainees or fellows at Mayo. It's a large training program, one of the largest in the country. And so some doctors are better at teaching, and some are better at research, and some are better at clinician, and some are better at leaders. And so collectively, the group delivers that. And everybody needs to do their share to have timely access. So if someone flies in from New Zealand and they're staying in a hotel. Rochester is a tiny little place surrounded by cornfields. So you need to have same or next day access for all lab testing, all imaging, all surgical procedures, all consults to neurology or rheumatology or whatever it would be. And then the departments are set up to work together also. If we're not for profit, and if a department makes more money than they spend on salaries, and then that money is Mayo Clinic money. It goes back and then it's distributed by consensus of physician leaders in partnership with administrators. So the departments are set up not to compete with each other, but to cooperate.
Yeah, so I'm hearing about some really interesting systems and structures, but obviously I'm sure what ties a lot of this together is a really strong culture. Can you talk to me a little bit about the culture at Mayo?
Yeah, so the culture is absolutely the mortar between the bricks, and the primary value is of Mayo Clinic that everyone knows, from the environmental services folks to the accountants to the nurses and doctors and social workers, is the needs of the patient come first. So we start with the patient, we work backwards. And, a lot of organizations say that. And I think we aspire to and work very hard to live it. And so we would have, meetings and board meetings and committee meetings and, section meetings and department meetings. And we would be regularly ask ourselves, is this really the needs of the patient coming first, or are we thinking about something else? And, because we're not set up to compete with turf battles and money issues, because that's when you come, you know what you're getting into. All the salaries are based at about the 65th percentile. So some people, if it's more about money, they'll go someplace else and make more money in private practice. There's a very team collaboration, cooperation ethic, and we perpetuate that in many ways, but it starts with who we hire. And so we have large training programs of over 4,000 learners at different categories. So most of whom we hire, it was not a day interview or a 5-hour interview. It was a 5-year interview. And so we really know if we think they're a match, and they know if this culture is a match for them also.
Yeah, I understand when people do get a job at Mayo, they have sort of a year-long contract and then have various sort of assessments and, understanding from their colleagues about how things are going. Can you talk a little bit about that?
we commit to anyone we hire, all the physicians. We have no signed contracts or anything. It's all handshakes. But after 3 years, we have a formal transition to a more permanent appointment. And during the first 3 years, they're doing regular work, of course, but it's filled with many different assessments and onboarding activities. Everything from simulation training for not for surgical procedures and codes, but simulation for time with actors who are Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist or Christian or atheist, and actors and actresses who are LGBT, so that we get comfortable dealing with people from cultures all over the world. We see all of our staff undergo a emotional intelligence assessment, not to pass or fail, but then to reflect on that and say, well, what does that mean for me as a team member? And then we have a series of leadership development experiences. Most of them are action learning in those 3 years. And we look at every physician, even if they never have a formal leader title, as a leader. And they're looked at as leaders by patients and by all of our staff in their actions and in their words. So, and then after 3 years, the vast majority will continue on, but usually at the end of 3 years, both parties know if it's a match with culture, and then we move on from there.
You mentioned leadership there. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, what leadership means to you and why it actually matters in healthcare organizations.
So leadership is the most important thing for an organization to thrive and for its people to thrive. Leaders have many critical jobs. They're not managers, for one, and they're not supervisors. Mayo is about 70 some thousand staff at our 23 hospitals. And every year we have a survey of all staff, doctors, everybody, same questions. And it's an opportunity to assess morale and teamwork and psychological safety, and if there are any issues with people feeling left out. And we share the results with all staff, and we take those surveys seriously to make improvements from year to year. Included in that annual staff survey are 12 questions that everyone is asked about their immediate leader. And we looked at those 12 questions about you as a leader are basically 5 behaviors. And the 5 behaviors correlate very strongly and are very powerful drivers of morale. And when we looked at the analysis of those, they were much more important than strategy or benefits or salary or other measures of culture. They were the most powerful determinant of emotional well-being of our staff. And the five behaviors they're not rocket science. They're common sense, and we want to make them common practice. First is, I appreciate what you did today. I want to recognize you in front of the group. I want to thank you. The second is first to seek to understand. What do you think we should do? What's on your mind today? Here's our challenge. Let's figure this out together, and I'm interested in hearing you talk before I talk. Third behavior is mentorship and coaching. So that's a very important job of a leader. And so what is it you want to be doing 5 years from now at Mayo Clinic? How can we work together for your dream to come true? The fourth is transparency. So you open the books, everybody feels included. And the fifth and last of the behaviors that we measure in all staff, all leaders across the organization, does everyone feel included regardless of phenome or genome? All these behaviors build trust. And that's one of the fundamental challenges and opportunities and roles of a leader, is to build trust in the staff. So leaders matter, but they matter for morale, for culture, for mentorship, for a climate where everyone feels respected, regardless of LGBTQ religion, color, cloak, whatever.
And I know it has a big impact on making staff engaged. Can you tell me a bit about that?
That was our prime task, was to deal with leadership development, the assessment and readiness of leaders. But the second piece was to address professional burnout, a national epidemic, particularly physicians who have the highest rates of professional burnout. And so that's when I got into the research. Tate Shanafelt was my partner in that. He was a lymphoma leukemia doctor. We put together a program that substantially reduced professional burnout. The words we use are important, so we want to use positive words that we're aspiring to instead of a negative word, burnout, we're trying to get rid of. It was more about professional fulfillment. Tate and I wrote a book on our process, and now much of what we've done of the 12 actions in that book to create ideal work conditions are being used across America and beyond for what is turning into be an epidemic outside of healthcare and healthcare professionals as well.
How do you feel burnout has changed in your career from what we used to describe it and see of it, and what it's like now?
The definition and the measurement of professional burnout was described by Christina Maslach maybe 40 years ago. So the measurement system has been in place, and it hasn't changed, but the drivers have changed. So burnout has gone up steadily and substantially in healthcare among physicians over decades. And so what's changed in some of the drivers is the amount of clerical work and the interaction with computers and mouse clicks, and in many organizations, a pressure to produce, the production model to reach certain targets, so that not-for-profits still have to have a margin. And I think that used the right way, the digital environment we're in can improve quality and can improve well-being and certainly productivity, but it was mainly designed for billing and not for recording and improving the care relationship with patients and families. So I think it's the work hours, some of the demands to produce, some of the clerical environment, some of the workflow issues create this cognitive dissonance, and that leads to emotional exhaustion and cynicism, which are the characteristics of professional burnout. And we have a pretty good idea about how we can reverse that in organizations.
And how do you feel concepts like resilience come into play when we're talking about burnout?
Where we should start is, what are the root causes? What's stressing out professionals who had above average mental health? Pre-med students have above average mental health compared to all the other majors and sections. And yet within the first half decade in the profession, the burnout rates skyrocket. And then they have among the highest rates of burnout, even though they started with good mental health. Well, so there's a systems issue there then, right? So you have to look at what is the system involved in our training and in the practice that we can address. It's a shared responsibility, but it's largely the responsibility of organizations and leaders to address the drivers and the causes. Personal resilience is very, very important. And it's part of the holistic approach to well-being, physical, mental well-being of all staff, including physicians. But the organizations that start with personal resilience make a big mistake, because first of all, they're not addressing the root causes and the biggest opportunity for improvement, but they're also sending this message to staff is, oh, so this is my problem, and all I have to do now is meditate, go to the gym, sleep, and eat, a Mediterranean diet. And so it can even make it worse, but it's the message no one should want to send. But yes, personal resilience is incredibly important, but it's part of the whole package, but you shouldn't start with it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I really like that you made that comment. Obviously, a little bit in jest around people, telling someone to meditate or download an app or something like that, because I think if you're not getting to the root causes, if you're not turning off the tap or hiring more people, then this will continue, and there can have quite a big rippling effect effect across an organization. So I'm really glad that you spoke about that part there.
Well, you're right, Jono, but that ripple effect is true. So that's positive and negative emotions are contagious within teams and between teams and with organizations. So the leadership of organizations doesn't get control of this, those ripples turns into waves and it's contagious. So addressing it the right way with evidence-based interventions is very important for the well-being of this professionals, and it has huge negative ramifications for patients. Patient care from teams or individuals that have some elements of professional burnout, cynicism, emotional exhaustion, loss of confidence in some of their professional ability. The patients experience more medical errors. They are less likely to follow through on care plans. They see more unprofessional behaviors of staff. There's less empathy. Their physical wounds heal slower. Surgical wounds heal slower if they aren't treated with if they don't think they're being treated with kindness and love. That has huge ramifications for patients as well. And there's a business case for it financially if someone needs that as well.
And I think what's underpinning some of this is around that some of these types of solutions are more of a systemic type of approach. It isn't just fixing this one point in one person's life at one time. It's actually looking at the entire organization and the full experience of what it is to work in that organization.
Exactly. And so the way I would look at the full experience, the research that we've done builds on decades of research here. It builds on research from DC and Ryan, the self-determination theory, and Harlow and Seligman on positive psychology and intrinsic motivation. And it comes down, so the way we sorted it out is there are four basic human needs of agency, collective effervescence, ikigai, and positivity. And those are evidence-based with decades of research. We synthesize that into these four areas. In each of those four areas, there are tactics that are validated, evidence-based in healthcare with doctors that we know improves their resilience. It addresses root causes, and basically over the long term sets the organization and its professionals up for success.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that as well as success is including the performance of that organization, both operationally but financially, and gives that organization a longevity that I think is really important to be thinking about and investing in.
Absolutely. So the costs are tremendous. If you look at physician turnover, it's very expensive. And if they're burned out and they stay, it's contagious, like you were talking about, and it's also they become more focused on themselves, and there's less teamwork, and then they affect the morale of the nurses, and then they leave, and turnover is very expensive. Professionals, particularly physicians who are burned out, have much lower productivity. So there's so many things that the organization is interested in beyond just the well-being of people in the organization.
Now, you taught me about an interesting concept when I was reading up about your background, something called esprit de corps.
Yeah, esprit de corps is it's French for spirit of the body, and I love the word. It gives you this feeling of a team approach, working together with colleagues with this common vision. It's similar to this collective effervescence, the term that Emile Durkheim, the French psychologist or sociologist from a century ago, coined. Esprit de corps is this harmony and energy and positivity that humans experience when they come together with a common ground and common pursuit. And so the ideal in medicine is you've got a doctor and a nurse and a social worker and managers and pharmacists trying to help this patient and this family. And so that's one of those four basic human needs is this social connectedness. People who are socially connected in their lives and their careers experience collective effervescence, esprit de corps. They live longer, and organizations are set up to thrive.
And so, for leaders who really want to embrace this concept, what are the types of things that they can do? I know we've just spoken about, having good hiring practices, building up a pipeline for feedback and potentially additional education. What are the other types of things that leaders should be thinking about if they want to embrace this concept?
Yeah, so Jono, Tate Shannon and I, is outlined this in several hundred pages in the book with 12 specific tactics, a blueprint with the strategy and the rationale. And I can briefly mention a few of them. So those four categories we just talked about, this esprit de corps, collective effervescence. So that one of the four human needs is a social connectedness. And so what can you do about that? Well, one of the tactics there is to called commensality. Commensality is a fancy word for sharing a meal with someone. And so at Mayo, with Colin West and Lottie Derby and Cynthia Stonington, all three of them and many others led 3 randomized controlled trials with doctors. But with commensality, having a meal and a conversation with professionals. Cynthia Stonington studies was of women physicians who were also mothers, and they looked at burnout metrics, but they also measured cortisol levels, the stress hormone, or one of the stress hormones. And all 3 of the studies, it's as good as science as you get, they all showed the same thing. Cortisol went down, emotional exhaustion went down, social isolation went down, positive feelings about the organization went up, cynicism went down. And so that's a tactic we know works. It's evidence-based. And so at Mayo, when I was head of leadership development, we got the funding for it. It's really budget desk. We gave $20 per person to have a meal, and they organized it, and they had a conversation with 6-8 folks, and they would do that every 2-3 weeks over a dinner, a lunch, breakfast, whatever. So that's a very simple one that we know works. And even these busy physicians that we thought would never find the time, the vast majority of physicians at Mayo signed up for it, either with groups of cardiologists getting together or full teams with orthopedic surgeons and physical therapists and nurses. And so we know that works, and that's a simple tactic in that collective effervescence space.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love that initiative, and I love that, it's backed up by science, but it's also just calls out to some basic behaviors that we kind of know to be true around human connection, around breaking bread and understanding somebody's background. And that all sort of builds trust and that camaraderie and all of those really good things. I guess what that also speaks to is a bigger piece, which is at Mayo around investing in social capital. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
So social capital is the trust and interconnectedness of people. And so we're talking about social trust within an organization. And so commensality would build some social trust and in those small groups. Those 5 leader behaviors build trust and social capital within those smaller parts of the organization. And we talked about those 5 behaviors. So agency is another one of those 4 domains of human needs: agency or autonomy. And so this is based on many studies, including Marmot's study, Michael Marmot, the epidemiologist in England, looking at thousands of workers over decades. And the workers that were able to say, I have some control over my work life, had less cardiovascular disease and cancer, and they lived longer. And so it's having some control over your life makes a difference in your well-being, including your health span and your lifespan. So what can you do there to grow social capital by increasing agency? Well, there are a couple. There's 2 tactics I'm thinking of. One is this, we call it removing pebbles is a listen, sort, empower tactic where we would not do something for doctors and their teams, but we'd help them do it for themselves. And so basically it's a short conversation. We're saying, what makes for your best day at Mayo Clinic? And describe it. And then what gets between you and that best day every day. And then you start talking about what are your frustrations, what doesn't work well. So you start with something positive, aspirational, and then you look at opportunities to improve. And then when they identify these frustrations, the pebbles in their shoes, then with support, we still empower them to do it themselves. So that builds social capital for this team doing this together. And they're closest to the work, they're closest to the patient, and they're the people that that know best how to improve the work. So they look at the workflow, the relationships, and all these pebbles that come up, and then we prioritize them by impact, by sphere of control, and by feasibility. And then we don't do it for them, but we help them with whatever improvement work they need, and to remove that pebble. And if it's someone else's sphere of control, then we escalate it to the right level. And so by working together as a team to make their work life better, we build social capital. Leaders are so important. And so under agency, another idea for building social capital and to give staff control over the work life, we let them pick their leaders. So every physician leader has a term limit of no more than 2 4-year terms, so 8 years. So they all rotate. All of them still have to practice medicine, surgery, pediatrics, whatever they do. And so let's say the cardiology chair is rotating out. We would interview every cardiologist, say who would be the best chair of your department. And then we get a list of, after talking to 100 cardiologists, we have a list of the top 3 or 4 that they would pick because they have social capital. They trust this person, these 4 people to lead. But instead of having the department choose one of those 4 cardiologists, then we have a committee of cardiac surgeons and vascular surgeons and cardiac radiologists and cardiac pathologists and some nurses and some administrators that pick one of those 4 that the cardiologists trust. And then the rest of the organization sees as someone who would work well in an integrated group practice. And so that builds social capital, not within the cardiology department, but with all of the groups that they need to work with to have the best care for patient every day.
And I like what you said there around how you're going out to those groups to find out who they really think should be leading them instead of sort of a more top-down type approach. I'd like to come back to that point before around, staff solving problems. I think sometimes health organizations or clinicians even can be intimidated by actually asking these types of questions, because then you find out, the long list of problems that are going on, and you may not have the budget or infrastructure or time, or believe you don't have those types of things to solve those problems. So you don't ask. What would you say to people who are trying to understand how they start building out an infrastructure to ask those questions and deliver on responses?
So empowering staff to take control of their leadership gives them agency, and of course they're in the best position to know what needs to be addressed. And so this listen, sort, empower process I explained, it's not a project that you do and then you move on. It's a way to manage. It's a way to lead. It's a way to work with staff, because there'll always be frustrations. There'll always be opportunities. There'll always be pebbles. And it's a way to be honest with staff. And so when they're going through their opportunities for improvement, then they can have a conversation with each other to figure out, well, can we just do this by changing the process? We can have someone help us who's an improvement expert, but most of them just need time and attention and maybe a little administrative support. Some of them, like you're alluding to, might take a capital budget or might take cooperation with 3 other departments, so they can't do it by themselves. So then with the support of the one-up leadership, they would say, we understand your frustration. Let's see what solutions there are and how we could work together. and see how much they cost. And then we say, okay, well, we've got 7 things that have come up. You've prioritized them by impact and feasibility, and then we can say we can afford 3 of those this year. So let's pick those together. And so then staff understands that it's not them making this decision, it's us. And so the best way to lead with those 5 behaviors we talked about, with this listen, sort, empower, is with the intent of making sure that we get our pronouns right. We and us and ours, not they and them. And so the more that we have these conversations, the more we talk about pebbles together and have conversations about how we can do this together, the more, those 5 behaviors of transparency and first seeking to understand, those change the pronouns or keep the pronouns for we and us and ours. And those are the organizations that are set up to flourish. This is research from 155 countries. If employees can say, my leader cares about me as a person, they will flourish. The resilience skyrockets. Their likelihood to stay at that organization skyrockets. It's their immediate one-up leader. And if he or she leads in a way where we can say, they care about me as a person, then we've got half the battle done.
And one thing that I think I'm getting from this as well is a story of collective leadership, that there isn't some sort of individual hero type of person who's running around who knows all. It's actually empowering people to speak up and to solve their problems collaboratively with others. And I think what's important to realize for all of us, if we think of our own work and we think of our colleagues' work, is we want to be proud of our work, and we want to get joy out of it. We should. And so if there's ways that we can facilitate that as leaders and as organizations and systems, I think we must. And so that's kind of the story that I'm getting from you.
Well, exactly. I didn't use those words, but they're exactly right. It's a collective leadership, collective decision-making model. And so it's rooted in the science of participative management. So it's not the hero, the autocratic know-all boss. It's a leader who facilitates team-based decision-making. And so those 5 leader behaviors facilitate that. A lot of our decisions at Mayo are made by groups of people on task forces or boards or committees. And sometimes, people roll their eyes and say, well, that'll take forever. Even if it takes a little bit longer than one person making a decision, in the long run, it's better for social capital. It's better for change management. It's better for buy-in of the staff. The same idea behind a rotating chair. So any physician leader has a term limit, and they're working with they're a leader among peers, and so you're more likely to engage because in a couple of years you'll be my boss, right? And I'm working with my colleagues, so you want to have the decisions, be collective and at least have given everybody a chance that wants to speak up and be heard, even though you can't have everybody agree with every decision, but the process is what matters.
And I think what I'm hearing there is you are really enhancing the quality of the decision. So if you make that decision, but you only make it once, and then you can move on, that is actually an opportunity cost missed by actually making the right decision and spending some time to do it. And I'm also hearing that if you have the right culture surrounding these committees and specialty groups, actually people know that they will get a chance to sit in these areas. And so I assume they're probably more likely to be collaborative with those groups because, they're all part of the same system and they may be there making some of those decisions one day.
Right. The whole Mayo model is built with egalitarianism in mind. All 70,000 staff at Mayo have the same pension plan, health plan, the same access to the same gym. The salary stuff is transparent. Everybody doesn't get paid the same, but everybody doing the same job gets paid the same. but they feel like they're treated fairly.
A couple of questions that I'd love to ask to you around what you see the future looks like in the kind of leadership space. I know you're not at Mayo at the moment. What do you see the future looking like, and what maybe challenges do we have that might be a little bit different from what we've approached in the past?
I think one of the fundamental challenges going forward for leaders, major workforce issues. Workforce in terms of supply. Today, there are 7 generations for the first time ever in the workforce. And in the younger generations, they have more choices and they're more likely to move if they come to an organization where they're not treated in a respectful manner because they have options and they'll go to another organization or they'll leave the profession. So I think that there's not a place in America, and I'm sure this is true for much of the West, that has a full staff of nurses and doctors and other NPs and PAs. And then that starts this vicious cycle, because if you're short of staff, then you can't give the best care. And then staff are working harder than they would choose to otherwise, and you get more burnout and you get more turnover. I think the keys is leaders that have the ability to engage staff and to lead with participative management, so that the staff can feel like they have agency, they're involved, they're respected, and they can work together to improve the work environment, to make it more attractive for more nurses and doctors to join and less likely to leave. There's not more money coming in healthcare. It has the lowest return on investment for the well-being of society. It's a 10% determinant. 90% are, the rest of the social determinants of education and transportation and housing and basic amount of money, and et cetera. For what we spend in America on healthcare, it's twice the average of the OECD countries, and as a country, we have the lowest population health metrics of all the West for spending twice as much. So that's something that leaders will have to address within healthcare and at a national level to be better stewards of what's now close to 20% of our GDP as an expenditure.
Yeah, and I think while that sounds a little bit depressing, it also offers actually opportunity, right? That it shows that there is a lot of waste in the system, a lot of opportunity for co-creating value with your staff, with your patients, and with your communities. As healthcare recognizes more and more its clinical care recognize its place within the social determinants of health, we can be supportive partners in connecting up to these other really vital parts of health and well-being too.
The leadership of today and the future should focus on 2 things: the esprit de corps of the staff, their well-being. That is free. It pays for itself. And they should focus on quality. Quality is free. It pays for itself. You drive out waste, variation, defect, improve patient experience. The dividends for focused Lean Sigma driving out waste, variation, and defect, the return on that is much greater than the margin for almost any medical procedure or surgical procedure. And both of those are good things for patients, and both of them are good things for staff. And if they focus on those 2, there can be some 3rd, 4th, and 5th priorities, not more than 5. But if they focus on those 2, we would be a long way down the path to high reliability and sustainable margins for not-for-profit hospitals.
I would like to mention you've recently released a book that you mentioned today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and where people can find it?
Yeah, thank you. Tate Shanafelt and I wrote this, and it's Mayo Clinic Strategies to Reduce Burnout, and the subtitle is really the more positive part, and it's 12 actions to create ideal work. All the 12 actions that we have in the book and the blueprint for identifying and measuring and delivering a highly resilient, low burnout staff, highly fulfilled staff, we've done and we've worked on and we published them. And you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at Oxford. All the royalties, all of them go to charity. So we did this because we wanted to help other colleagues and other organizations improve the well-being of their staff and the outcomes of their patients. And we think these are some strategy and 12 tactics or actions that we know work. They mainly take the time and attention of leaders, not a big capital budget.
Great. Well, that sounds like an awesome book to check out. I'll make sure I link it in the show notes. Dr. Stephen Swensen, thank you so much for your time today.
Jono, thank you so much.
And that brings us to the end of the podcast. If you want to go deeper about any of these topics or join the discussion, visit our website, clinicalchangemakers.com. Now, one small ask. This is a brand new podcast, so if you enjoyed our work, please rate us and share it with your friends and colleagues. Until next time, take care.